Since the Switch era Pokemon games, Pokemon has received the notion that it has become a pay-to-win franchise, especially across its VGC scene. With Urshifu being Incineroar's closest rival to being the #1 Pokemon in the history of the franchise, while there's been other top-tier performers such as Calyrex in Sword and Shield, and even Tornadus has become a pay-to-win Pokemon through the generation. But just how good is Scarlet and Violet at trying to mitigate this issue? Has Scarlet and Violet created a Pokemon in the DLC through the form of Ogerpon that has escaped the pay-to-win allegations and instead just proven to be a fairly good Pokemon in VGC? Let's take a look at how Ogerpon is done in Regulation E and see if it's escaped this pay-to-win notion and instead just become a good Pokemon that can be an accessory to your team without needing it in order to win. Before we discuss how good Ogerpon is in VGC though, we should establish the definition for what I'm going to be considering today as a pay-to-win Pokemon. When I'm discussing the Pokemon that are considered pay-to-win, I'm talking about Pokemon that aren't necessarily available even if you do have the parents to breed them. Pokemon like Rillaboom and Hisuian Arcanine, despite being through home only, you could technically breed these in your game, so they aren't going to be included for our list today. However, a Pokemon like Urshifu Rapid, where you need the Sword and Shield DLC, which is a whole separate game to begin with, but also the DLC for it, or an option like Tornadus, which you can get through multiple other games, but none of which are in Scarlet and Violet, these would be the Pokemon that we're going to be talking about today when discussing pay-to-win options. Now, before we say if Ogerpon is truly a Pokemon that you need in order to win a game though, we do have one more aspect to go over, and that's if Ogerpon is even essential to success in VGC. I would definitely say these Pokemon are a shortcut to winning games, as we have seen through a lot of the major events in Regulation E. However, out of the 7 total major events, with 6 being regional level and 1 being an international level, we have actually seen a team that ended up winning with only Pokemon that you can either breed in Scarlet and Violet or catch without the DLC. And this would be at the Sacramento Regionals, where Michael Zhang ended up winning with a team consisting of Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, Tyranitar, Como, Hisuian Arcanine, and Rillaboom. While the term pay to win is how the fanbase does refer to these Pokemon, I think this team proves that you don't actually need these Pokemon to win, as this team in general did a great job at just adapting what was good in the format. So instead, I think that technically a more accurate term would be pay for Pokemon to increase your chances of winning, but let's be honest, it's just not as flashy. So now that we've broken down the notion that you don't even need pay to win Pokemon in order to actually win at VGC events, would Ogerpon actually be the first example of a truly pay-to-win Pokemon, or is it more of an accessory to good teams that you can replace if you don't feel like shilling out $30? Now, I will say Ogerpon has a few very distinct things that it can take advantage of, unlike any other Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, and these do need to definitely be addressed. For one, Ogerpon is the only Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet that can actually boost its stats specifically by only using its Terastal. And that's already a pretty big distinction on paper from every other Pokemon in the deck so far. Now, by holding the Hearthflame, Wellspring, and Cornerstone Mask, you actually change the boost that Ogerpon gets. In its Teal Mask form, you would typically gain a boost to speed, though the Hearthflame boost will now give you 1.5 to your attack, the Wellspring will give you a 1.5 to special defense, and the Cornerstone a 1.5 to physical defense, all by just clicking your Terra button. Now, even outside of all of this, there still are plenty of other things we haven't even begun to touch on, such as an incredible signature move through Ivy Cudgel, incredible coverage that Ogerpon gets, access to setup through both Swords Dance and Focus Energy, which in particular is really useful for Ivy Cudgel, which has a high crit rate, and even many other things that Ogerpon has. But did it actually live up to the hype and become a Pokemon that was truly centralizing Regulation E? In Regulation E, Ogerpon actually had a pretty mixed performance. For one, out of the 7 events that we did see a lot of pay-to-win Pokemon having success at, Ogerpon actually only managed to win 2 of these. Both of the wins were through the Wellspring Mask as well, though the Hearthflame Mask has had a ton of success at regional level events, typically at least reaching in the top 8, and then the Cornerstone and Teal Mask have actually begun, as of the more recent events, to see some placements of their own. Definitely though, the Wellspring and Hearthflame Masks have had by far the greatest impact in the format, both of which have a very unique set of dual stabs that force one particular Terra type actually to have risen significantly in usage, being the Terra Dragon typing. We'll see Terra Dragon Gholdengo actually becoming one of the best threats as we go through the Regulation E timeline, proving to be a staple now in VGC, due to the fact that pre-Terra, it's a great check to fairies through its natural stab and Make It Rain, and post-Terra, you have the ability to check Ogerpon both with the Wellspring and Hearthflame Bomb simultaneously. The rise in dragon types through both the Terra Dragon Gholdengo as well as other Pokemon like Roaring Moon, Como, and even Salamence as of recent has actually given a lot of precedent for Cornerstone Ogerpon to see some great success recently. And this is where I was saying that Cornerstone and Teal have kind of popped up because of how much the format has now revolved around countering the Wellspring and Heartflame forms. I think the fact that Dragon has now seen relevance though for the first time since Generation 5 as a dominant typing for its defensive attributes definitely says a lot about just the impact that Ogerpon could have, especially when one of the top 3 Pokemon all generation, besides Regulation A where it was banned, was none other than Fluttermane, which is an incredibly broken and very optimized fairy type that is so oppressive over the format that most dragons have to Terra to even be viable right now. So if Ogerpon is such a strong Pokemon in VGC, is it also a pay-to-win option? Well, I'd argue that's actually not the case, and I think there's a few very clear distinctions here from Ogerpon versus another Pokemon such as Urshifu, Tornadus, or even like an Ursaluna or something else that is specifically very much so in that pay-to-win category. The Pokemon Company did a few things very much right when actually building Ogerpon, and I think unlike Urshifu, it's not going to end up getting significantly buffed in a later generation due to the fact the mechanic gets cut. For one, when Terra does end up getting cut in future generations, Ogerpon will now lose a huge piece of its identity, making it viable in the first place, being how much Terra impacts Ogerpon. While Ogerpon will no longer have to worry about being locked to a specific Terra type, at the same time though, it's going to lose its individual stat boosts that it did gain with the different mask forms, which was a really big deal because these helped a lot with certain damage calcs that actually made Ogerpon rise to the top in the first place. But I wouldn't even say Ogerpon is essential to team building like Urshifu is. Urshifu has a lot of very specific things that actually make it a very near mandatory presence sometimes in team building, such as its ability to bypass Protect, which is one of the biggest things in terms of VGC for the foundation of the format, and also the guaranteed crit through both of its signature moves depending on the form that you use. And on top of that as well, Ogerpon's stabs at the very least can definitely be replaced by other very high profile Pokemon. There isn't a single Pokemon that can replace any of these forms on a team frankly, but at the very least you're typically able to find a combination of 2 Pokemon that can partner together in order to replace the use of Ogerpon on a given team. Rillaboom is already a pretty common partner with Ogerpon anyway, and with a little bit more offensive investment, you can actually end up replacing a lot of the damage that Ogerpon would have done for your team in the first place. Options like Terragrass with Miracle Seed have been rising anyway in the format, and they do a lot better of a job at actually being a strong grass type wall breaker, since you get a priority Grassy Glide, and you also have Wood Hammer off of a slightly better physical attack set than Ogerpon would have. And again, the Stab Terra Grass only helps here. Overall, this Rillaboom definitely can in theory wall break a bit better than every form besides Hearthflame, and when you factor in that a lot of other common Rillaboom partners can just replace the roles of the secondary stab, it's not really too hard to actually find a replacement for Ogerpon if you can't afford the DLC. For example, Hisuian Arcanine actually probably just does a better job as a rock type than Cornerstone would be for most players, and as a fire type, it can at least do enough damage to where it can partner with its rock stab and then the Terra Normal E-Speeds to prove to be a fairly relevant place in the meta. Not only this, but with the Terra Normal E-Speed especially, you have a +2 priority option, which even if you were to run Grassy Glide and Hearthflame, which some players opt for, you would be outpacing them by a mile because you're in a whole different priority bracket here. And this proves to be very powerful, especially when partnered with options like Chien-Pao, while being a lot less reliant on Rillaboom being on the field for success. Meanwhile, for the offensive benefits of the Wellspring form, you have Urshifu Rapid, which just does the job infinitely better as a water type wall breaker, especially with Terra Water Surging Strikes in the rain, just blowing past most opponents anyway, and this also just slots pretty easily onto the Rillaboom, Hisuian Arcanine archetypes that are already present in the format. And this core already is one of the most noteworthy offensive pieces to begin with on the ever-present Tornadus teams. Now I will say, there is one area where Ogerpon will forever be the only candidate in this format, barring some new option for this move, which is as a good Follow Me user. Now a lot of the Rage Powder and Follow Me users in the format definitely lean a lot more in the defensive side, with the most offensive option that I can think of currently in Scarlet and Violet besides Ogerpon being none other than Volcarona. So Ogerpon definitely has a pretty unique case to be made here as a specifically Follow Me user, but one, this set has fallen off a lot in recent times, and 2, you can definitely throw a lot of the good Follow Me Pokemon on next to incredible wall breakers, and while it is a lot less optimized in terms of getting that really good roll compression Ogerpon can offer, it still is fairly viable at the very least. and I would argue even with Ogerpon, you might want to start looking into those follow me redirectors anyway, because the Swords Dance sets are just that much more potent at the moment. Now, Ogerpon still can definitely be appreciated on a team, and I'm sure that there are players who will just opt to use it because it's still a really good Pokemon, but to say that it's pay to win I think is definitely misleading, even if we just go by how the fans perceive the term versus what would actually be a more accurate representation here. While we don't necessarily know what the future holds for Ogerpon, I will say that without some massive overhaul like regain these stat boosts, that Ogerpon will, objectively speaking, be a pretty balanced Pokemon going into the next generation, though I would argue it's already one. And in future generations, it's actually going to be more of a niche option with just incredible dual stabs that can be useful for a 5th or 6th slot on the team, but will never be actually truly breaking a format. I think the Pokemon Company did a really good job actually of making Ogerpon into an incredible DLC Pokemon that's both meta relevant right now to show off the DLC exists and to get fans interested, while also not making it mandatory for new players to get the DLC and get Scarlet and Violet and get a home transfer, all just to use this Pokemon and keep up with power creep in VGC. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something new about one of my personal favorite Pokemon coming from Scarlet and Violet, being Ogerpon. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see some more content like it, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 1,000 subs, and I think we can definitely make it with your guys' help. Also, make sure to leave a like and comment down below what other Pokemon you guys want to see me discuss next. I have a couple ideas that I got from the Fluttermane video, and I really want to try and get a lot more of this type of content out, as I had a lot of fun doing this kind of research for these types of videos. Also, if you like this kind of content as well, make sure you guys check out Kurt, who's going to be uploading some VGC content soon on the channel, and Kurt also just did an incredible job editing today's video, so thank you very much, Kurt. I really appreciate the effort you put towards this content as always. With that said, I'll see you guys in the next video next week, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. Until then, peace out guys, and happy holidays if you celebrate.